Hi, welcome. Aya, sweet, welcome. All right, loves. So, happy Friday. It's the day of Venus yet again. It's the day of Devi, and it's the perfect day to dive into the topic for today, which is Deity Yoga. I'm really excited to share about this because it's what I'm going to share about it is not always thought of in this way, and then this deeper aspect of yoga is not often talked about. So I'm looking forward to unpacking that with you, those of you who are joining. And I received a very powerful healing session today, so I'm a little, my nervous system is beautifully relaxed, and my mind is very spacious, so we'll see what rides through on the waves of that. So welcome. I'm sure those of you who are here are familiar with me, but if you're not, I'm Halo Saronko. I am the founder of the international and online school, Shakti Temple Arts, which is a school of feminine embodied awakening. And I am doing this series of lives. So I've already done 2. This is the 3rd out of 4. This series of lives is for an upcoming program that I have starting on the 31st, which is called Temple of Shakti, and it's a 6-month online group mentorship into the path of living Tantra for modern mystic women, probably like yourself if you're tuning in here. So today, each part of this series, we're kind of going into the different months, topics, and modules of Temple of Shakti. And today we're going to explore Deity Yoga. And so how that relates to the program is that month 4 and 5 are completely dedicated to the deities Shakti and Shiva. So we have an entire month that we spend with Shakti. We have an entire month that we spend with Shiva. But that doesn't mean a lot if we don't really have a grasp of what that means. And so Deity Yoga is, I would argue, and I don't even think there is an argument around it, Deity Yoga is the most important aspect of Tantra, of the practice, of the spiritual path, of the science even of Tantra. And so for us to even understand, okay, so what does Deity Yoga mean? Well, a deity, I think many of us are familiar, it's a god or a goddess. That's a very simple way of putting it, but we're going to unpack that a little further. And yoga means union. So this is a way to use deities, gods and goddesses, which we're going to get to know more in just a moment, using our meditation, our practice, making offerings, worship, etc., towards deities for the pursuit of our own wholeness and union, which is essentially, so a deity is a personified image of divinity, right? It's a symbol of divinity. And as we are moving closer towards our realization of that, we are doing practice, which is the yoga, to attain that union, right? So there's this beautiful way that, and this is how my teacher describes it, and I just love this, that, you know, in the modern kind of spiritual movement, there's a lot of like, embodying the deities and all of this, and it's not wrong. It's not completely inaccurate, but it can be a bit premature in that it's really, you know, our egos really like to grab onto stuff like that, and for us to come actually into a place of union, the ego really needs to get, calm down a little bit. So if we are using deities to prop up our ego, we're going to lose the point. And sometimes if we jump to embodying deities prematurely, it can be very caught up with the ego, which then ends up being a trap on the path rather than a liberation. And we want the liberation. So with Deity Yoga, we have a very different orientation, and it's one of devotion, I think I would say, first and foremost. And so we have what I like to call a subject-object relationship to the deity, meaning they are perceiving me, I am perceiving them, we are separate, and that allows us to have a relationship. And in that relationship, as that relationship deepens through the practice, eventually, yeah, hi Samsara, welcome. Big difference. It's like a subtle shift. It's like you just turn the mirror a little bit and it's a different thing. So yeah, in the really traditional orientation, we want to have that devotion because there's a natural humility that comes with that. Every time I use the word humility nowadays, I feel like I have to do a little like disclaimer because I feel like it almost has a bad rap nowadays. It doesn't mean to be small. In fact, in some ways, the most humble people are the biggest. It just means that it's not the ego in the driving seat. In my mind, it's more the essence, and the essence is what merges with the deity eventually, right? The more we can kind of bring the ego into the place of servitude rather than have it in the driver's seat, we can have it supporting our process of liberation, then we can start to actually have the experience of our divinity, and the deity is showing us the way to get there. So I have this habit. I'm just like, okay, here's the pool and there's the deep end, and let's just go straight to the deep end. So I hope you're following me here. I can't help it sometimes, most of the time. So let's rewind several steps and look at what deity is in the lens of Tantra, because that's really important. So deity in the lens of Tantra, we can say it's a god or goddess. And in the tantric system, there are thousands of deities. The goddess has thousands of different faces and aspects and attributes and qualities. The Shiva also has, thousands of different aspects and qualities. It's very just like our universe where there is infinite potential. It is made up of them, so within them there's infinite potential, and yet each one is whole unto itself, right? So we don't have to go to every deity in the pantheon to attain, our awakening, our liberation. We can just follow one stream, or we can move around. It doesn't matter. But Tantra has this beautiful idea that we each have what's called our Ishta, or a primary deity. And this primary deity is almost like they're almost like this a guardian angel of sorts of our greater spiritual path, and they're with us lifetime after lifetime, and they're kind of like whispering and planting the little breadcrumbs, and it's just a really beautiful thought and idea that we have this one deity that's like our person, that's really got our back in this particular way. So we have all these different deities, but what are they, right? Because there's not so much this orientation that these deities are. This is a really tricky thing to try to explain, that they're real, right? And real in the sense that there is, like this kind of sense that is kind of come into the Christian church, that there's this God and he's in the sky in heaven, and he makes judgment, and there's like a very literal idea around who God is, around what the divine is. Here with deity, it's not literal, and that can be really hard for the Western mind to understand until we start to peel back the layers in the traditional context. And as we peel back the layers, what I love so much, I could talk about this for hours and days, and that's why I made a program. So what we come to find is that Tantra it is a spiritual path, but it's a spiritual science, because we're going so deep into like the very material that makes up this entire universe. And I say this a lot, but everything that Tantra has found is being proven by modern day science. But this was realized, not created. It was realized. It's a path that was realized by yogis and yoginis and, seers way back when, before there was technology, before there were ways to study, the universe in the way that we do now, right? And it's just, to me, it blows my mind that what they already knew and what is still intact in these systems is now being proven to be accurate. So how this relates to what deities are, in their not literal sense, because it's not literal, is that deities are the particular frequencies, the particular energies and rays of consciousness, right? So if we think of that, there's the one, and then there's all these different web of energies that have to come together to make up the one. We could think of the 5 elements, for instance. And then there's these particular, like the consciousness is just one, but if we put light into like a crystal or a mirror, a diamond where there's different facets, it's going to come off in all these different ways. So consciousness is like that ray that as it hits the movement of the energy, it kind of fractalizes, and there's all these different aspects of consciousness. So the reason there are all these different deities is because there's all these different kind of like ways that we can turn the mirror that reflects the light just a little bit differently, and that allows for life to experience itself. So like I was saying about the subject-object relationship, that's how we can have that relationship, right? And so if we unpack, we can put... I love to break things down because that's how our minds work, but take it all with, loosely, because we really don't want to get caught in concepts. But we can technically break all the deities down in the tantric system to Shiva and Shakti. Shakti being the feminine principle, which is also to be held loosely, and Shiva being the masculine principle, also to be held loosely, right? So Shakti is the supreme energy. So she is that everything that moves. She is our thoughts. She is our bodies. She is the 5 elements. She's the dance of life. She's all of that movement, all of that change. And Shiva is most often associated with pure consciousness, right? And that's the witness. So if again we think of that subject-object relationship, the subject is what's witnessing and the object is what's being witnessed. That's the dance of Shiva and Shakti. Where we don't want to get caught up, right? So it's almost like Shakti is like dancing. She's showing the infinite possibilities of consciousness, and consciousness is just watching itself. She's the mirror. It's like the sun and the moon, right? The moon is shining, the sun is shining. It's like pure consciousness. And the moon is just showing that pure consciousness. And as she does her dance, she's like, oh, it looks a little different like this. It looks a little different like this, right? So and I love using that example because it just shows us this, and this is how the rishis figured out, or the yogis, yoginis, whatever we want to call them. This is how they figured all this out. It's written all around us. All we have to do is pay attention, right? Even just the sun and the moon in our own sky from our own seat in reality, like how mystical is it that the moon is many, 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 many times smaller than the sun, and it just orbits our little earth, and the earth is much bigger than the moon, and yet much, much, much smaller than the sun. The sun is massive, but we're just the right distance that our moon and our sun look exactly the same size, so that when there's an eclipse, they perfectly, things perfectly line up between the sun, the moon, and the earth. Now, if that doesn't tell you that there's something more intelligent happening here, I don't know what to say. So that is that more intelligent, that intelligence that is orchestrating all of this mystical phenomenon. I mean, if you just look at even the complexity of the human body, and then add that something animates the complexity of the human body, and that something happens at death with the human body and at birth, it's just like, the mind just, wow. So the greater intelligence is Shiva and Shakti. This is that. But when I say and, that's not even totally accurate, because we also can't get lost in one's masculine, one's feminine. I mean, yes, Shakti, the depictions of Shakti are all, they're goddess. She's the goddess. The depictions of Shiva are masculine. He's the god. But they're in union, perpetual union. We couldn't exist if that wasn't the case. It's interpenetrating. Energy and consciousness are like layers, are like threads in a tapestry. And the best way to describe it is if you're familiar with the symbol of the Sri Yantra. It's one of the most famous yantras. I'm like looking around because I usually have one somewhere, or I do, but it's a little complicated. I'm not going to grab her off the altar. She's resting. But the Sri Yantra, I think most people are familiar with it. That is a yantra of that overlap, right? That's why there's all those different triangles and layers. It is Shiva and Shakti and how they are enmeshed for everything to exist. Taking a breath. So, when we enter into Deity Yoga, we have to understand that we're not entering into something that is necessarily so easy to grab with the linear mind. Because we're trying to get away from the linear mind. Because that's where our freedom lies. Because that's where our ability to be natural lies. Right? And what is freedom essentially? It's really just our return to our natural state as human and divine simultaneously. There's this weird mechanism of separation that is important, but it causes a lot of suffering. And so a lot of us end up on this path seeking, and it doesn't matter. I mean, the internet, Instagram is a perfect example of our seeking. What are we actually doing on here, if we're really honest with ourselves? We're seeking something. But we're seeking it, and this isn't, I'm not judging you, I do it too. We all do it if we're on here. But we're seeking in a very superficial way when we come onto these platforms, and eventually, I think for most of us, and I'm sure that any of you here listening to me right now are in alignment with this, but eventually something says, this is not actually what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something so much deeper and richer, and that's when things really start to change. And that's what's so powerful when we start to have a relationship with deities, because that's us saying, I'm ready for something bigger. I'm ready to know something greater. I'm ready to experience life in the way that some part of me knows is possible, but I get in my own way. So the deity helps us. We surrender at the feet of the deity because they are the thing. It's like if you're wrapped up in a knot. No. Okay, I have a good example. So let's say, and I'm going to use the serpent as an example because they're kind of like a knot, but they're a knot with sentience and they're a symbol of Shakti. So let's say we are all bound up in a serpent. Right? And we can't move. It's like maybe a constrictor or something like that. And we're, asking the antelope that walks by for help, and they can't help us. They have hooves. And then we're asking the, elephant that goes by or whatever. Nothing else can help us. But what if we talk to that serpent directly and we're like, hey, I want to be free now, And this is kind of what it's like when we go to the deity. Like Shakti especially, she is the one who creates the bondages, and therefore she also holds the key to unraveling them, to assisting us in that process. So traditionally, what Deity Yoga is, like the very literal sense of Deity Yoga, first of all, the path of Tantra it's inseparable. Like I'm sorry, but you're not doing Tantra if you're not working with deities, and the deities from the Tantric pantheon. It's not Tantra specifically if you're working with Aphrodite. It can be if you're working with Lakshmi, though. So, and at the same, Lakshmi is Aphrodite in a certain way, right? They're of a similar archetype, but they're different frequencies. They're of different lands. They can, it's like there's a lot of distinction, but they're pointing towards a similar thing, right? So if you're not working with deity, that's not Tantra. because tantric practice that's like the pinnacle. Yeah. And so Deity Yoga is a very internal yoga. It can be external as well. We're doing like ritual offerings. If you've ever been to India, if you've gone to the temples, it's what's happening, to the murti, or the idol of the deity in the temple. You can feel the energy. It's really powerful. And so there is external worship, but on the deeper levels, it's mostly internal practice where you are meditating with the deity. You are using specific mantras, which are sound frequencies. In the tantric system, so as we're talking about that web that creates everything, well, the two main forces, so we're thinking, okay, so we've got energy and we've got consciousness. And how those move are through sound or vibration, we could say, which this is, again, totally proven by quantum physics. It's a miracle. There's sound and there's light. And we can all attest to that. And both of those move in waves. It's kind of like the whole theory of particles and waves. And then what have we also learned through quantum physics lately? Things we observe change just by being observed. That is it. It has been proven. This is Tantra. So we have to work with the deities. And so in Deity Yoga, traditionally, the deities, like who we're working with and the way we're working with them, how we are calling forth their assistance, the specifics. So even though while all the deities, I should say, are unique, they each have their own obstructions that they help to remove and liberations that they help to grant. And one of the reasons in some lineages they go to different deities is because different deities are going to give different things. At the end of the day, there's only one. So you can also get all of that through just going through one. It just depends on your personality and what works for you. So, where am I going with this? Distill, Halo, distill. So when we're working with the deities, we're working with sound and light, and that comes in mantra and yantra specifically. So we're meditating, and this is all an internal practice. I'm not going to share it on an Instagram live because it's too precious to do that with. But traditionally, this is why there's lineage, there's a guru, and sometimes that can feel inaccessible, especially for the Western mind comes in and they're like, but I just want the thing. How do I get the thing? And that was me once upon a time. And then I got, stripped down and humbled in the process. And when I was mature enough, the doors opened for me, and I feel eternally grateful for that. And it's continuing, the process it just continues. But, yes, awakening Shakti is great. There's certain things in there that I don't completely agree with, but it's also a really great starting point. I do like that book a lot. I'm working on my own book that's similar, but with my lens on things and some other aspects. So I'm very, very excited to birth that. It's it's still in process. It's still in gestation at the moment. So that's the traditional way of working with deity. And I'm not going to give the particulars here because it's just too much, and that's not really where we're going with this. But it doesn't mean, we can go into this black or white thinking where, we think, well, if I can, it's like I can either have it or I can't. And so that makes it feel inaccessible. And the deities are here. It doesn't matter. They're here. They're in you. You are made of their energies. They are all around you. So it doesn't mean that we can't, just because we don't have a guru or a lineage or the exact practices, doesn't mean that we can't have the benefit of having a relationship with these deities. And so that's one of the things that I am personally really passionate about because, my journey didn't start. My personal journey didn't start as like a hardcore, tantric sadhaka, right? And I still wouldn't, to be honest, consider myself a hardcore. I'm like, I still gotta like flex some muscles to get there at some point. But the deeper you go, you realize how hardcore the path really is. But I didn't start that way. And in fact, for many years, it was my own love affair. I mean, mine had to do with going to India. You know, my first trip, I was having all these man issues in my personal life, and I went to India and I met Shiva, and I kind of projected or all of those, you know, like the perfect man onto him. The path is incredibly humbling, it is. So I fell in love with Shiva, and I was studying classical Indian dance for the first time, and I just remember it was like I was offering that dance to Shiva over and over and over again, and it would help me heal from this like distorted relationship. So while we don't want to minimize the deities to masculine, feminine polarity, kind of duality thinking, we can approach them that way. We just want to understand that it's bigger, right? But we need to approach the deities where we are at. Someone's asking where in India I recommend to go to learn Tantra. That was a tricky question. Any guru or temple specifically. So I was around. I went to some different places. I have some recommendations I could give. I would rather give those in like direct message. So if you're interested, just please message me. I'm happy to share. Yes, temples, there are some specifics there for sure. So I had that relationship to Shiva, and that was really my fuel. And that birthed this whole concept for me of the cosmic consort, which is this idea of form and formless as lover and beloved. And it's that same kind of yearning that we find in ancient Persian poetry, like Rumi and Hafez, where it's just that like, I want to know you. And I really felt that in my studies of the dance. I still do. I feel that in the reason someone's saying the path is dangerous. It can be. And that's why we have to really, really, really be mindful and not kind of just throw ourselves in. Thank you for sharing that. It's really not to be taken lightly, and that's one of the things I like to stress, and I like to help show ways, the gentle way we can enter into the path. So I started having that whole experience, and then so I'm going to share one of the temples that really got me. So I also started falling in love with Durga, because I think it's really hard not to fall in love with Durga, to be honest. Does anyone feel me? Give me some hearts if you understand what I'm talking about there. But I started falling in love with Durga, and I went to Varanasi, which is the town of Lord Shiva. I went there because I learned that was the town of Lord Shiva. And so I felt, without even knowing what pilgrimage was, I became a pilgrim, really. And so I went to Varanasi, and while I was in Varanasi, I went to the Durga Mandir temple. That's a temple in Varanasi. And that was, if I could say, it's hard to say the exact moment that for me this whole path opened up. But if I had to pick a moment, that was the moment. That was the moment I knew something. I didn't know what I knew at the moment, but it was just something happened there. Ma was like, she really came in. I think she'd been guiding me the whole way, but I was kind of just like following the nice, pretty things. Ended up in India. So when I went to that temple, I felt her. I had a direct experience of her, and it changed my entire life. And that is the whole reason Shakti Temple Arts was birthed. That is the whole reason I am so passionate about sharing these teachings and sharing this path and sharing it in a way that is accessible, where we can have, because at that time I didn't have initiation from a guru. I didn't have, I was starting to have an idea from some books I found in a bookstore what Tantra was and all of this. But I was a clueless 24-year-old who was just, in awe of this other culture from my own that made randomly more sense to me than what I knew back home. And so when I was in that temple, I had a direct experience of her, and I didn't have a mantra that brought that on. Granted, I was in a temple, I was in India, but I realized that was accessible. And I remember the rest of that trip, now I'm going into it. I didn't even expect to go onto this tangent, but here we go. So we're just going to go with it. But that same trip, I, traveled. India is not the easiest to travel solo as a female. It's not the safest, to be honest. But I really wanted to go up north to study dance with my dance Guruji at the time, and he was already up there. And so I decided to take a train, I think all the way from Varanasi up to northern India into the Himalayas near Dharamsala area. And it was one of those late night trains, and I missed my stop because I couldn't read any of the little signs, and I ended up at the furthest stop in Jammu Kashmir, which is like the end of the line, by myself, 4 a.m., Thank God there's a lot of English spoken in India, but not in the more remote places. There was enough I got by, but I remember just being like, Ma, I need help. And in that exact moment, so this is after I had that direct experience of her, and I felt the same energy again. And this man came and he was like, do you need help? And I was like, I have no choice but to trust this person. I was like, yes. And it was like same moment. Ma, I need help. Do you need help? And this man made sure I got every step of the way to the bus I needed to be on, and they made sure I didn't wait at the train station for 5 more hours, as a lone white female, and just made sure that whole thing happened. And it was so beautiful, and it was one of those moments where it just, I've had a daily relationship with Ma ever since. And it's been one of the most important aspects of my life. And I don't necessarily think we're all going, the beauty of this world is that we each get to find our own flavor of the divine. We each get to find what really works for us. But I think it's so beautiful and so, Jema, and so important that we find something that gives us that connection and that relationship and that something bigger and deeper and wider that our soul is actually seeking, some force that we can ask to be with us on our journey, that we can ask to assist us, that we can surrender ourselves to. It just adds this whole other dimension to our experience of life. I don't know what I would have done without her, and would do without her. And in the process of that whole unfolding in my own life, I look back and I'm like, she was there the whole time. She was there the whole time. Every little breadcrumb that led me to India, to that temple, to where I am today, has been her doing. And it could not be, because in this lens, she's doing all of it. In fact, she's so vast and so intelligent that she's guiding each one of our own threads perfectly and individually. And there's 8 billion of us, plus how many animals and plant life. And it's just, again, when you really sit into the scope. So that is someone I want on my team. That is a force of energy and consciousness that I want on my team, right? Because I can't do that in my limited sense of self. And I want to touch that. I want to taste that part of me that is one with it all. Yeah? So this went in a completely different direction than I had anticipated it going. So I'm going to reel it back a little bit. If there are any questions, please ask. I know I kind of went deep and wide in a few different directions with all of that. Please feel free to ask any questions. And I want to just kind of pull that back and relate it to my work and the body of work that's coming up at the end of the month, which is my 6-month mentorship program called Temple of Shakti. Surprise, surprise. And so in this live series, I've been kind of going into, okay, the first part of the journey, this is where we're covering the second part of the journey. And so we're in the third part of the journey where we're spending a full month with Shakti. And I am very excitedly, I am going to share a very gentle, safe, and simple traditional sadhana with those of you who do join. And I think you could maybe guess who we're going to be working with. I'm going to leave that to your imagination. And so we'll get that experience, but then we're also going to work with, okay, how, if we find a face of the divine, like let's say we're reading the book that Samsara just mentioned, Awakening Shakti by Sally Kempton, and she talks about different faces of the goddess in the Tantric/Hindu pantheon. Like, let's say we're reading a book and we see one and we're like, wow, I just really feel a connection to this goddess, but what do I do? Well, it's like it's a horrible example, but I'm going to go with it because it's what popped in. It's like Tinder, right? So you don't know anything about this person, but you find someone and you're like, okay, they're like, something's calling me here, right? So what are you going to do next? You're going to establish communication with them. Hey, I'd like to get to know you. Like, let's meet up. And so in this case, maybe you meet up by making her an altar and sitting at the altar, or just finding more books about her. Or if you are in India, going to one of her temples, or, finding a teacher that knows more about it. It's just, you start to follow it. And the path will start to open up. So in Temple of Shakti, we're going to kind of go into that. I know, isn't that a great example? It's like Tinder, but different. I'm sorry to minimize it to that, but it's a really good way to explain it. So we're going to kind of go into that. Like, what are some ways that we can get closer to these energies that we want to have this relationship, that are really calling to us? And that doesn't even have to do, like, the way I'm going to teach it is, of course, oriented towards what I know, which is the tantric system, the Hindu kind of pantheon. But it doesn't have to be limited to that. This could be like someone from Greek mythology that you really feel a connection with, or Egyptian or Mayan. Like, it doesn't matter, but it would be the same steps. And then there are some little unique steps to each different tradition, of course. And so I'm going to be sharing those in Temple of Shakti in month 4. We're spending a whole month with Shakti. And then month 5, we're spending a whole month with Shiva. And while we're not simplifying them, I do find something that is so powerful, because we do have this split. And I feel like this is a reason so many of us are drawn to Tantra, myself included, that there is this kind of core split between the masculine and feminine. We could call it the mother and father wound. Let's call it that. And if we look at Shiva and Shakti as like the Maha, the divine, the mother and father of creation, we have an opportunity to heal that initial core split that we all experienced through just simply being born into the realm of being human and having imperfect parents and everything that unfolded from having imperfect parents, right? And so we are going to be working with that, really healing the mother-father wound and coming into that place of the inner marriage of these energies, and really coming into communion. Because, okay, to be honest, in this day and age, there is for sure a suppressed feminine principle, and we need to liberate that globally. There is also a distorted masculine, which needs to get its kinks unkinked. But in general, as far as the real lens of Shiva and Shakti, we are so lost in the realm of Shakti, and we have forgotten how to reconnect to the witness, to that part of us that is not so invested in the dramas of the human experience, but that can sit back and really take that larger view. And that is going to be the juice of month 5 with Shiva is really starting to practice connecting with that witness consciousness and that ability to really sit back and not get pulled. Like, Ma is all about that play of desire, and she will give you everything you want, but everything you want is a tricky thing because you can get very entrapped in that. So we want to be careful. We always want to be tempering. They have to come together. They have to come together. Right? So we can't really separate them. This is why I love this in India. Most Shiva temples will have a small Devi temple inside. And in some of the temples, it's very like, the way to do it is you go in and you go to Shakti first before you go to Shiva. And in fact, there's like cute little stories that Shiva will be upset if you don't do that. If you go to him first, he's upset. He's like, no, you have to go to her first. And like vice versa, in some Shakti temples, there will be at least some symbol of Shiva. And so it's important that they're kept together. Okay? So, and that's, they can't not be. So I think that's all I want to share about that. That was a lot. And like I said, kind of interestingly went in a really different direction than I thought it was going to go. But that's what wanted to come through. So I hope there were some gems there for you. And I am bringing a group to India next January, 1 year, and we're going to go to a bunch of these temples, and we're going to be doing the traditional teachings and practices along the way. So connect with me. We have a big wait list already, so I'm not advertising it much, but you are welcome to get on the wait list. It would be awesome to have those of you who are really feeling connected to everything I'm talking about here with us, because we're going there. And we're going to dance too, which I'm really excited about. So in Temple of Shakti is that actually it would be such an amazing to do the program. It's all online. It's not quite the same, but we hold it down. Temple of Shakti would be amazing to do the 6 months and then go to India. Would be like, I don't even know. We might just all liberate together in that process. So right now India is, so the pilgrimage was supposed to be this month, and it's not time yet. So India is difficult to get in right now. I think things were much more mellow. They had that one big wave of COVID was that spring? Time is weird nowadays. And I think they're having another one. My partner's has family over there, and they're, he's hearing people who are struggling right now. So, but largely, I think things are okay. The woman I do pilgrimage with is actually living over there right now. She's Canadian, but she lives in India pretty much full time at this point, and she says everything's good. So, they're just navigating everything like everyone is right now. So, so where was I going with that? So Temple of Shakti, I just want to share a couple more things before we close out about that, because we are fast approaching the kind of closing of the gates before the program starts on the 31st. So the registration will be open until the 30th, and I have several ways that I am kind of assisting you to be able to be a part of it if you really have that, like what I felt when I first went to India. If that is in you, in regards to this, I really want to make it accessible. So I just wanted to share before we close some of the ways that I have available to be with us if you're feeling that call but maybe need some assistance. So I do have scholarship applications. Those are closing on Monday. So if you are interested in applying for a scholarship, please just write me directly, and I will make sure to get you the application. I have 3 scholarships available. They're different tiers, but that is available. So if you're interested, please write me. I'd be very happy to send you the application, and then just get that to me by Monday. And I will be sharing just personally who receives the scholarships next week. And then the other ways is I do have a sign up with a sister discount. So if you have a beautiful sister, first it's a win-win because you get to share the beautiful journey with a sister and you both get $250 off. So that is another way that you can join us for a discounted rate. And then the last one is you have to have already been on my email list, but I did just send out this morning. Thanks, Samsara. That's the website if you want to check it out. I did just send out this morning an email that has some coupon codes in it for single registrants, meaning you're not registering with a sister. And so if you are on my email list and you didn't see that, check your email. There's a coupon code in there for you. And was there something else? I have to check my notes. And we also have just a payment plan option. So you can pay in full, that does give you a little discount, or if it's easier for you to pay over time, there's a monthly payment just over the 6 months. So I would love to have you, especially if you are really interested in these realms and want to go deeper. It's going to be an amazing journey. We have a great group, and not only is all of this kind of philosophical teaching a part of it, but we are doing a lot of practice. We're going to be diving into Ayurvedic practices. I also have a lot from the Taoist system because I was raised partially in the Taoist system, and then I took my own veer towards Tantra, but I still do teach a lot in the Taoist system as well. So we're also going to have that. It's a really nice combination, I think. And then we also have a dance program included, a full Taoist program, and a Tantra yoga program that are just like sub-class series that are part of the full mentorship. So it's pretty full on and epic, and you get the pre-released version of my book. So I actually tricked myself into writing a book through doing this program. So it's not the complete book, but you're gonna get like the bulk of the book is part of this program. So if you have any questions whatsoever, reach out, talk to me about them. Via DM, you can email me, and I also have on the website that Samsara shared in the comments, you could also set up a 15-minute call with me. It's complimentary. I'd be super happy to connect with you. So I think that covers all the bases. I don't think there's anything I'm missing. So you are invited. I would love to have you for the journey. It's coming up very soon, so it's getting towards time to take the leap if you have been thinking about it. And yeah, thank you so much for those of you who joined me today for this exploration of Deity Yoga. I hope it was insightful. I hope it was inspiring. I hope at the very least it got some wheels turning in a different way, because I just love that ability we have as humans to expand our mind and the way we look at things. So I hope there was some of that here today. And I'm going to go ahead and close out. If you were here for just part of this and you wish you caught the beginning, you can catch the replay in my feed. If you have anyone that you think would love to experience this live, please share it with them. That's always appreciated. And I will hopefully see you next week as our last live. And we're going to be talking about Dharma, which will be very, very also interesting. So that'll also be Friday. And Friday is our last weekday before the gates for Temple of Shakti close. All right, my loves. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope to see you next week. And then after that, and after that, and after that. Have a beautiful weekend, everyone.